Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Moaning. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name is Erica. Heya, how you doing? And if you're into the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, maybe you're just into the mythology, maybe you're just here because someone told you that my hair is never cooperating. I mean, look at this guy, right? Like, what are you doing? I can't seem to get it to sit down properly, so I'm sorry. Once again, my hair is just, it's not cooperating today. So anyways, if that sounds like you, or if you're just into the history, that's also totally fine. Definitely, you should be hitting that subscribe button and the bell icon so you know every single time I post in the future. But onto the topic of today's video, and we're going to be doing exactly what the title says, which is diving into book 11 of Homer's Iliad. So if I could summarize book 11 into one sentence, it would be that there are lots more killing sprees, but the Trojans ultimately come out on top again. Now, book 11 is long. It's one of the longer books, so I'm going to do my best to summarize because most of it is just sort of war scenes. So I'm going to be cutting out a lot of those in this video because if you guys want to read those, they're not major characters that are killed or anything like that. So if you want to read those, you can go to the original text and check those out for all the details and all of that sort of shebang. But this video will just kind of be the most important moments because yes, a long one. And I don't have the patience to sit in front of this camera and to do a hell of a long episode for a long book where nothing really happens apart from death and dying. So anyways, with that being said, let's just dive into the book. So book 11 opens on the following morning, okay? Remember that book 10 was a night raid? Right, so now it's after the night, it's now the morning. So it opens up, it's daybreak, and Zeus is the first person to act in this book, and he basically encourages the goddess of hate, that is a literal goddess in ancient Greece, tells the goddess of hate to go down and to encourage the Greeks into battle. So she does this. She flies down to the Greek camps, she sits herself on Odysseus' ship. So for you guys who haven't been watching the entire series, Odysseus is the smack bang middle of the Greek camps. On one end is Ajax, big Ajax, and on the other end is Achilles, and Odysseus in the middle, so she sits there because that way she can inflict the most hate, I guess. Hate within the most Greeks. That sentence was terrible. So what she does is she basically lets out this massive cry, right? And that encourages all the Greeks to get into battle. I don't really know the science behind it, but that's what she does. And so all the Greeks are like, yeah, let's go to fight. And so there's this very long description of Agamemnon, and he is putting on all this gorgeous armor and all of this, literally guys, the armor is gold, it's stunning, but it's a really long description, so I'm not gonna get into it. Puts all of that on. The rest of the Greeks do the same thing. They are not described at length like Agamemnon is, but they are still described. And then they all pair up with a charioteer, because as I've been saying, in a chariot, there are two people. So you have the driver, and then you have the I was gonna say the weapon person, the warrior, that's the word. Now, as everybody's getting ready, right, got the Trojans on one side getting ready, the Greeks on the other side getting ready. As this is going on, we find out from Homer that today is not the Greeks' day, that in fact Zeus is specifically with the Trojans today, and he is not, hiding that from anybody. But Homer tells us that more souls of the Greeks are gonna be flung down to Hades, basically. That's not an exact quote, but it's something along those lines, where they're going to be going down to Hades instead today. So as I keep saying, right, there's none of this whole, oh, I wonder what's gonna happen. Homer tells you every step of the way. At the beginning of this book, he's like, lots of Greeks are dying, be prepared, get your tissues out if you feel like you need them. So just, we know. Every step of the way, we know. And right on cue, the men start attacking each other, okay? They just go for it. And there are loads and loads of deaths. But actually, the gods are not involved today. In other books, the gods have come down, they have shown their favor, they have fought for certain warriors, certain soldiers, whatever. That doesn't happen today. And in fact, they're all described as being on their respective homes, which is on Olympus, on the mountain. Hephaestus had made them homes once upon a time. So they're all there, right? And a bunch of them are described as sort of being, not cursing, that's the wrong word, but blaming Zeus for all of the turmoil that's happening, because they're like, Zeus isn't still in a bad mood, blah, blah. So that's where they all are today, though. They're all just basically being bitter in their homes instead of getting up and doing something. Unsurprisingly though, Zeus couldn't give a rat's ass what the other gods think of him, and instead, he's just sitting there watching the battle, keeping tabs on everybody, and keeping score. For the moment though, people are dying. They're literally dropping like flies on the battlefield, and it's mostly because of Agamemnon. I'm not going to describe every single guy that Agamemnon kills because he goes on his own mini killing spree. It's genuinely impressive, but he kills a bunch of Trojans. Zeus decides that basically Agamemnon is getting way too carried away, and so he starts encouraging Hector into battle. And so Hector gets up and he's like, well, I'm gonna sort that guy out. And so he ends up going to run and defend the fig tree, sort of the fig tree area of the wall, because he wants to sort Agamemnon out, but also to obviously protect Troy. And Agamemnon is going in that direction anyways. So Agamemnon, as he goes there, is just slaughtering the crap out of Trojans. It is literally just name after name after name. And then Homer will say like, then he cut down X amount of people, or like the vast majority of people. Agamemnon wasn't stopped. And you're just reading it like, he is just a one-man, like Tasmanian devil. Like, think of Taz from the Looney Tunes. That is literally how Agamemnon is in this scene. In fact, the only people that Agamemnon does not kill are those who run away. Like, that is literally how many people he kills. And so Zeus, again, he's watching this and he's just like, all right. So he sends Iris down, the messenger goddess. He sends Iris down to talk to Hector. And he's like, you should really encourage him to like stay into battle, because I promise that if he stays in battle, this is what Zeus says, promise if Hector stays in battle and he fights Agamemnon, well, not necessarily fights Agamemnon, but if he just remains there and doesn't let Agamemnon do his whole thing, as long as he's there, I will make sure that they win by the end of the day. And so Iris takes this message, she goes down to Hector and she's like, hey! And she just basically repeats exactly what we heard Zeus say. But once again, this is the Iliad, so they repeat things like 3 or 4 times. This is not the second time that we hear this thing, and Hector's like, cool, okay, I hear you. So holding 2 spears, this man is always armed with 2 spears. He's got 2 spears and he walks over to meet Agamemnon in battle, like, I'm ready. And he like rallies up all of the Trojans and he's like, guys, let's go. Unfortunately for Hector though, yeah, Agamemnon kills all of them, like literally just slaughters the lot of them, until one of Antenor's sons, who goes by the name of Koon, K-O-O-N, but the second O has the dot thing. I'm writing it up in the corner, all right? That is his name. He comes to face Agamemnon because Agamemnon has just killed his brother. So he comes to face Agamemnon. Agamemnon does end up killing him, surprise, surprise. But before he ends up like dropping to the ground dead, this guy actually, he slices Agamemnon, or below the elbow, so it would be like here. He basically sliced him with his spear across the arm. So Agamemnon feels a little bit of pain, but a lot of pain. He's just like, ooh, ow, okay, not chill. And then chops that guy's head off, so like it's fine. But as the war continues, as the battle continues, and Agamemnon is still, you know, killing the crap out of people, he starts throwing rocks at these other Trojans. I told you that rocks were a weapon, now they're being used by Agamemnon. So he starts throwing all these rocks at them, and he starts to notice the pain in his arm a little bit more. It starts off as being like a little nagging pain, and then just over time it gets like bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where, and this is where me and Homer have a little bit of problems. This is the only time in the Iliad where I'm like, Homer, you need to simmer the f down. He says that the pain in Agamemnon's arm is the same as when a woman gives birth, which I'm like, I mean, personally, have I given birth? No. Do I know what birthing pains are like? No. Who else hasn't given birth? Homer. Does he know what birthing pains are like? No. I think he should really stick to this whole, you know, like describing people like animals, like that's fine. But this whole, I'm going to describe a little scratch below an elbow on a man to birthing a human out of a hole this big, like, no. Homer, I need you to simmer. We're gonna forget that Homer made that comparison because like it doesn't sit well with me. Even though once again, I can't actually speak because I haven't given birth, I don't know. But doesn't sit well, we're gonna forget it because I like Homer, we're just gonna ignore that he said that. But Agamemnon, once again, he's throwing all these rocks, starts to notice that it hurts a lot. And so he's like, screw this, I'm actually now useless in battle. So he hops back into his chariot and he has his charioteer drive him, back to the Greek camps. And on the way, he's like yelling at all the Greeks, being like, you guys need to stay in battle, you can do this, hell yeah, I believe in you. Like he's just really rallying them up. And then he gets brought back to the Greek camp. So Agamemnon, after his whole killing spree, is now back with the Greeks. Naturally, the first person to realize that Agamemnon is now out of the battle is Hector. In fact, he sees Agamemnon being driven away on the chariot and he turns around to the Trojans and he's like, guys, Agamemnon is gone. We're so good. Praise the Lord. Well, praise Zeus. That was a very Christian way of doing that. Praise Zeus. Oh my God. Yes, let's get into battle. Woo, let's go. Despite me just acting like Hector is like your best friend or like your super extra friend who's like, oh my God, yes. He's described as Ares again in this moment, which once again, Ares is always sitting in this book, but at the same time, like Ares is the god of war. He's described that way though. And then he like marches into battle and Hector now has his time to kill everybody. Like, holy crap. The numbers, you know, the numbers on Agamemnon's death kill just like ran up. Holy crap. Hector, it's literally, guys, it is name after name after name. It goes on for so long that Hector is just unstoppable. In fact, Odysseus sees him being absolutely mental on the battlefield. And Odysseus is like, holy crap, I have to get in there. But he can't go in there alone, obviously, because Hector is freaking terrifying. So he ends up calling for Diomedes, where he sees Diomedes across the field. And he's like, yo, bro, bro. Remember how we're best friends? Yeah. Have we forgotten how to fight? I need you to come over here and help me. So the pair of them together then start killing a bunch of Trojans, okay? Like, you guys thought that I was over exaggerating probably when I said there are a bunch of killing sprees at the beginning of this episode. Like, that's literally this entire book. So they start killing a bunch of people, and Hector notices, and Hector's like, no. So he starts riding towards Diomedes and Odysseus, and Diomedes is terrified when he sees Hector. Like, he's like, holy crap, we are now in trouble. So he does what Diomedes does best, and he throws his spear at Hector, hoping like maybe we can slow him down at least a little bit. And he throws the spear right at Hector's head, and it hits him in the helmet. Like, it literally, it doesn't lodge itself, but it smacks Hector's helmet. Hector's startled by it, and he's like, what the fuck was that? But because the helmet was given to him by Apollo, it doesn't actually like go into the helmet. So it just bounces off and goes elsewhere. And Diomedes is like, what the fuck, man? Because Diomedes now has to run over and pick up his spear, right? That's just an inconvenience. So he runs over, picks up his spear, and he waves it at Hector, and he's like, the only reason why this didn't hit you is because you have the help of a god, because of Apollo, blah, blah, blah. And next time, if I have the help of a god, then I'm gonna kill you. Which, okay. We have spoken about terrible trash talk. This is not the worst, but it's also like, it's unnecessary in my opinion. Like, Diomedes is a bad man. I don't know why he has to say the stupidest sentence where it's just like, dude, just leave it. Just be silent. You would have seemed much cooler if you were just silent in that moment and were just like, damn it, that's a pain. But he goes to pick up his spear, and then one of the guys that he had previously killed is sort of like close by-ish. So he runs over to go and pick up that guy's armor, because as I said, they strip each other's armor. So he goes to pick up that armor, and this is Diomedes' fatal flaw. As he's bent over, he's not looking. And who sees him? Paris. So we got this little bitch in the corner, right? Paris is in the corner. He sees Diomedes, and he's like, now's my time to shine. Because bear in mind that Paris can't hit a moving target, let alone a stationary one. He's actually not good at hitting stationary targets. So now that Diomedes is stationary, he's like, I got a better chance. So he pulls back his arrow, fires at Diomedes, and it hits Diomedes in the foot. Like, it literally goes through the top of this man's foot and into the ground underneath his foot. It goes into his right foot, by the way, if you guys wanted to know which foot. So it goes into the right foot, and Diomedes is like, oh my sweet baby Jesus, what was that for? And Paris, seeing that he's finally hit something, is like, oh my god, look at that, I hit Diomedes, oh my god, I'm so great. I wish it was in the belly, because then you would have died, but you know what, I'll settle for this. This is pretty great. Which obviously Diomedes is like, hey, pretty boy, 1, shut up. 2, if you actually met me in battle, I would have slaughtered you because you have 0 skills and you're a useless fighter, and that is apparent by the fact you hit me in the foot and you're boasting about it. He was like, dude, what? Because, once again, he just hit him in the foot. He wanted to hit him in the belly. I don't understand. On the trash talkometer, guys, if we have a trash talkometer, I can't make graphics, but like, just imagine one in your heads. Like, I think the one from Diomedes beforehand was, actually, that's far too high for it to be. It was probably down here. Paris's, why would you highlight where you wanted to hit somebody? That, I don't get that. Like, just say, I was aiming for your foot. Like, I'm that good of an archer. I was aiming there, I shot you, it was great. Instead, he's like, oh, I was actually aiming for your belly, but I got it in your foot, and that's good enough. Like, what? Regardless, though, Odysseus sees Diomedes get hit, and so he goes over to shield him with his shield. Protect him with his shield. It's better than using the same word twice. So he goes to protect him with his shield, and Diomedes sits down on the floor, and he pulls the arrow out of his foot. I mean, ew. And he is described as being in pain as he does it, but you're reading it like, ugh, man, like that's, ugh. And because he's now injured, he's pretty useless because he can't stand on that foot now, so he then hops into a chariot. Well, he drags himself into a chariot, sort of pulls himself up, and then the chariot drives him back to the Greek camps in order to get help, the assistance that he needs. Unfortunately though, this leaves Odysseus completely by himself in the middle of the battlefield, which is not good. That's not a position that anybody wants to be in. So Odysseus is completely alone, and he initially has this little soliloquy where he's like, I don't know if I should leave and go back to the Greek camps because that would be a cowardly thing to do, but staying in battle by myself is also not a smart thing to do, so he doesn't know what to do. Either way, a bunch of Trojans end up sort of like jumping on him, so he ends up fighting all of them off. I don't know how he does this, because if you have more than one person attacking you, like, I don't think that Jackie Chan could have done that, but like, still, we're talking like a whole army of these Trojan people attack Odysseus. He kills every last one of them. Are they taking it in turns? How does he fight off all these men? Regardless though, the other Trojans do see this happening. They see him sort of taking one after the other, and they all just basically continue hopping on him and fighting him. And so Odysseus is like, I am screwed. So he calls back. He literally is just standing in the middle of battle being like, somebody, anybody, help me. And after the 3rd time, this man yells 3 times, and on the 3rd time, Menelaus pipes up from some other part of the battlefield, and he looks over at Ajax and he hits him and he's like, hey, Do you hear that? Sounds like Odysseus. Maybe we should go help him. And Ajax is like, oh, yeah, I guess so. Like, what? I can't be too critical because Ajax does immediately run over, and so does Menelaus. And so they then find Odysseus basically surrounded by all of these Trojans. And Ajax obviously moves into the middle because he's got his big ass shield, right? And he goes into the middle and he puts his shield out in front of Odysseus because Odysseus needs all the help he can get right now. And as he's being shielded, as he's being protected, I gotta start saying that. As he's being protected by Ajax, Menelaus pulls Odysseus out of there because Odysseus is not only injured, I mean, he's not massively injured, like it's not on the level of like Diomedes being shot through the foot, or like Agamemnon, who basically doesn't have an arm, but minus that, like this level of injury is not on the same level, but it's still like if he keeps fighting, he's sort of screwed. So Menelaus then pulls him out and puts him onto a chariot and sends him back to the Greek camps to get help for his little minor injuries and the fact that he's probably exhausted and dehydrated as Big Ajax, though, does remain in the middle of all of these Trojans, okay? He remains in the middle of them, and he starts killing the lot of them, right? So there's a lot of Trojan deaths that happen. They're not actually specifically noted in this moment. It's just Ajax killed a lot of people, which, like, I believe he is literally the wall of the Achaeans. So he kills a lot of them, and this is only important because at the same time, on the other side of the battlefield, Hector is also killing a ton of people, sort of in the same way that Ajax was doing it. So he at some point rode over to the other side. He's like, woo, I'm gonna have this like fun time over here. But we only know this because Nestor and Idomeneus are off in that corner. So that's sort of where the narrative jumps to. It jumps to Hector being a madman, but also that Idomeneus and Nestor are the lead men on this side of the Greeks. Supposedly the two of them are actually doing a really good job, okay? They're doing a good job of protecting everybody from Hector, doing a good job of like having him not necessarily like stay back too far, but at least putting up a good fight. But obviously Paris is gonna screw that up. So Paris then comes with a little bow and arrow again, and he just kind of shoots randomly into this crowd of people, and it's just like, I hope I hit a Greek, and it hits Machaon. For those of you who've been watching for a while, I have discussed Machaon before. He is the healer of the Greeks, and I told you that he was gonna be important in battle because anytime he gets injured, people freak the f out. So Machaon is hit by Paris with this 3-barbed arrow. You might be wondering like, what the hell is that? So basically, at the end of an arrow, if there's a photo on Google, I will be including it, but if not, I'm gonna try and describe it. So an arrow, as per normal, is just like a straight sort of line, right? And it's pointy at one end. But when you have the end pointy bit has like 3 little more pointy bits around the side of it, so that when the tip sort of goes into you, it does go into you. When the tip goes into you, there are then like 3 other parts that sort of cup around it. So that's what it looks like, right? And one of those hits Machaon in his shoulder, in his right shoulder he gets hit. So Idomeneus freaks the f out. In fact, he sees Machaon get shot and he immediately turns around to Nestor and he's like, get your chariot out here. Machaon has been hit. And Nestor freaks out. And in fact, okay, Idomeneus says an exact quote. I think it's something along the lines of like, a healer is a man worth many in knowledge, I think is the exact quote. Once again, I don't have like notes on me. I do have the line number written down on my sticky note down here, which is line 514 of book 11. So if you guys want to go and find it, then you can find it there. But it's something along those lines where basically he highlights how important the healers are, and obviously Machaon is their healer. And so the fact that he's hit, who's gonna heal Machaon? Machaon is the healer. They actually do have a secondary healer. I'll mention him in a second, but either way. Machaon gets hit, he gets then dragged into the chariot, like Nestor drags him into his chariot, and then he's pulled back. So just so that you guys know, we're about 2/3 of the way through book 11, and we have Agamemnon got injured, Odysseus got injured, Diomedes got injured, and Machaon has gotten injured. Like, those are 4 of the best fighters that are now tapped out of battle for God knows how long until they are okay again. So as Machaon is being dragged back to, well, driven back to the Greek camps, Hector then stops to talk to one of his brothers, because there are 1,000,005 sons of Priam. He stops to talk to one of them, and one of them is like, hey, yo, like, all of this is happening over here, but I think that they have it under control here, whereas everybody else is over on that side, and they have to deal with Big Ajax, who's f***ing terrifying, so maybe we should go and help them. And Hector's like, you're so right, we should go and do that. And so he then hops into his chariot with his brother, who begins with a K, but they hop into the chariot, and then they go to the other side of the battlefield. But I wanted to note this in the video, because as they're doing that, they're described as like the chariot just running over all these bodies. And I was like, oh, man, that is dark. I wonder if a bunch of those people were just injured, but because you ran over them, they're now dead. Like, what? But at the same time, is there not a clear way of getting there without running over bodies? That's how many people have died, people. That is a lot. And as they get over there though, Zeus now gets involved and he inflicts this panic into big Ajax. So it's not panic necessarily for battle because Ajax is right in the middle of battle and he gets stunned to the point where he stops. He's like, what is going on? And he gets scared more so for the Greek ships rather than for his position in battle, just to highlight that. So he ends up turning around and going back to defend the Greek ships because the Trojans are getting really, really close and Ajax is not comfortable with that. And it is described that he did this really reluctantly, like he didn't want to go back and like only protect the Greek ships because he was having the time of his life in battle with his big ass shield beating people off. Like that's what he does best, but he does turn around and he goes to protect the ships. Now this guy called Eurypylos, who I think I've mentioned before, he's a Greek and he sees Ajax running back, so he's like, well, I have to go help Ajax. So he runs in to help Ajax. He ends up shooting this one guy, right? He literally shoots one of the Trojans. He goes over to pick up that guy's armor, and guess who sees him and decides to ruin everything? Paris. So Paris, with his little stupid bow and arrow, fires at Eurypylos, probably intended to hit him somewhere in the torso, but ends up hitting him in the thigh. And it's a really bad hit. Like it's a bad hit, not from Paris' side, but for Eurypylos' side, because Eurypylos not doing so well. In fact, to literally avoid dying, he drags himself. Eurypylos has to drag himself back to the Greek camps, and as he's doing that, he's screaming out to everybody, being like, someone has to go help big Ajax. He's by himself. Help! The men then run out to help Eurypylos, and in the process, Ajax moves a little bit back, so they don't have to move that far forward, and so they're all sort of fighting in this middle ground, but the Trojans are really, really close now. And that's where we leave the action, okay? Because now the narrative snaps. You guys thought I was done with the book. But now the narrative snaps to inside the Greek camp. And Nestor is with Machaon, remember how he was riding back, right? So he's on his little chariot riding back inside to the Greek camps, and Achilles is actually on his boat. So he's all the way at the other end of camp, and he can kind of see that Nestor is on his chariot with somebody else, and he sees the other person is injured. So he's standing on a ship and he calls for Patroclus. He's like, Patroclus! And Patroclus comes up from God knows where he was, but he shows up and he's like, what's up? And Achilles is like, I need you to go and figure out who Nestor is dragging back because it looks an awful lot like Machaon, and I'm about to freak out if it's Machaon. So Patroclus is like, let me go check it out for you, and then I'll come back and I'll return the news, because remember, Achilles is being such a child, he doesn't want to leave the ships and his tent. That's where he exists. So Patroclus has to go and do it. So he runs off to Nestor's tent. By this point, as he arrives, Nestor's already arrived back at his tent with Machaon. Patroclus shows up and Nestor is like, oh my God, a guest, amazing. So he tries to sit Patroclus down. He tries to do this whole like very hospitable sort of thing, which by the way, this might sound weird considering it's a war book and considering war is happening, and meanwhile Nestor is like, oh my God, Patroclus, come in and sit down, have some wine. Actually, that was totally normal. Like, this is actually not part of the book that you should dispute. Very normal ancient Greek custom. He tries to do that though, and Patroclus is like, actually, I'm gonna have to decline because I'm just here because Achilles wanted to know who you brought back. I can see it's Machaon, so I have to go and relay this information back to Achilles. That's once again the only reason why I'm here. But this sets Nestor off, okay? So Nestor, rightfully so, I'm glad that someone said it, but Nestor is like, what the hell does Achilles know about pain, about war, about anything when he's sitting in his tent and all of us are literally dying on the battlefield? In fact, he goes through all the people who are injured. He goes through Diomedes, Odysseus, Eurypylos now who's injured, Machaon who's injured, Agamemnon, oh my goodness, I nearly forgot Agamemnon. But you know, he's like, we have all these people who are injured and we need Achilles, and he won't even come out to fight. Like, what does he know about anything? And why is he trying to get in on the business if he doesn't even want to be part of it and he doesn't want to protect these people? Which, totally fair point, Nestor. I have dragged Nestor, but I'm very glad that he said this. Unfortunately, Nestor then does what Nestor does best, and he ruins this moment by going on this like 3-page rant about a similar situation that he had when he was young, just basically how he dealt with it. But it takes 3 pages and you're reading this like, Nestor, get to the point. I know you're an old man, but there's a point somewhere in there. And the point, basically, to summarize it for you guys, is that what he's saying to Patroclus is that when they first went to get Achilles for the Trojan War, the only person that Achilles would listen to was Patroclus. And so he's saying that Patroclus is the only person that could influence Achilles' decision to come out and fight. And if he can't, he should try. But if he can't get Achilles to leave the tent, then what he should suggest is that possibly he could wear his armor, like Patroclus could wear Achilles' armor, for like a day, just to terrify the Trojans, to buy the Greeks some time in order to come up with a better plan and a better mode of action. So Nestor is the one that puts this idea in Patroclus' head. And Patroclus is a bit like, I'll think about it. As Patroclus is running back to Achilles' tent, he has to go all the way across the camps, right? Because Achilles is all the way at the end. And as he gets to Odysseus's ships and all of that, which once again is smack bang in the middle, as I said at the beginning of this video, he runs into Eurypylos, who is literally limping through the camps. And he's like, holy crap, you look terrible. Like literally the blood is still like oozing from his cut. There's no arrow in it. Obviously he pulled that out, but like he is not doing well. He's sweating profusely. Apparently Eurypylos is in a state, okay? Instead of asking how Eurypylos is first, instead Patroclus is like, hey, I got a question about the battlefield. I'm wondering, at the state that everything is, in the way that everything is there a way that the Greeks could still win? And Eurypylos is like, nah man, there is no way. We are being eaten alive out there. We're in a bad state. Like this is not gonna go well if we keep doing the same things and if Achilles doesn't come out of his tent. They're just like, no, this is not. However, Eurypylos does take advantage of the situation and he's like, yo Patroclus, you were taught how to heal by Achilles, who was taught by Chiron, so could you possibly heal me? Because Machaon, the healer, as I've said, I am so sorry book, but the healer, he's injured, right? So he can't heal Eurypylos. And the other healer, because there is a secondary healer, he's out on the battlefield. So Eurypylos is like, I need help and I need help now. And Patroclus, stupidly, is kind of like, oh, well, I don't know if I can right now because I told Achilles that I would go back to the tent and tell him what Nestor said. But maybe I'll think about it. I don't know, maybe. And you're like, dude, just heal Eurypylos. He can barely stand up straight, which then he does end up doing. He does decide that that is obviously worth his time. And so he does take time to like make all these, you know, ointments and stuff like that to help Eurypylos. And the end of the book is literally Patroclus cleaning up Eurypylos in a very glamorous way, I guess. And that is the end of the book. It was really long. It's really not the most interesting book. I understand that we have to put it in here. I have to put it in here because I'm talking about every single book. Next episode will not be more interesting. The next real big episode, if you guys want to know, if you guys don't need this for school, I would say the next big episode will be episode 16. The previous big episode was book 10. So up until book 16, we're just sort of prepping for book 16. And book 16, for those of you guys who don't know, that is when Patroclus comes out of the tent. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be seeing you next time with more videos here on Moaning. We'll see you then.